Which of the following is true? A. Raw diets are the safest diets for dogs and cats. Or B. Lovebirds are real birds that scientists have observed expressing human-like emotions. Keep listening to Formosa Fauna to find out. Spend the next 20 minutes feeding your brain with Formosa Fauna so you can learn all about the animal kingdom and become smarter than all of your friends. Every Friday is Formosa Fauna Friday. I'm Tristan, the voice of Formosa Fauna. I love animals and I love talking about them. If you're even remotely curious about the animal kingdom, you're in the right place. On today's agenda, we're going to talk about Fischer's lovebirds, raw pet diets and whether or not they're really the best, the bird flu fatality rate of 67% in cats, and how to get your dog to not pull while on a leash. Valentine's Day is just around the corner. This February 14th is Valentine's Day, which is next Friday for me at the time of recording. As all of you lovebirds are gearing up for the holiday, why don't I tell you about an actual lovebird? The Fischer's lovebird. That is spelled Fischer. Fischer's lovebirds are restricted to a small region of East Africa. They are stunning creatures with a wingspan of only about 5 inches or 12 centimeters and a bill to tail length of about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Their faces and beaks are bright orange, almost a burnt orange, to red color in the darker spots, and that color gradually transitions to yellow and then green further down their bodies. Like the 8 or so other species in the lovebird genus, the females and males will form a close, long-lasting bond, keeping each other as much company as possible, and exhibiting what scientists call loving behavior, devotion, and physical affection. When separated, they are even observed to exhibit mourning-like behavior. The term anthropomorphism, that's another hard one. Anthropomorphism involves placing human feelings, emotions, and behaviors onto non-human objects or animals. Many people say that animals aren't capable of such human emotions, but the lovebirds are named what they are named because they are widely observed to exhibit such emotions. They are members of the parrot family and form pairs that are bonded extremely closely, that bond lasting for life. The Fischer's lovebird and other species of lovebirds are regularly kept by bird enthusiasts, which is why their physical appearance might be easy to envision for many listeners. But their capture from the wild has had enormous effects on their natural populations. Back in the 1980s, the Fischer's lovebird was one of the world's top 5 most wild captured and traded bird species. Legal protection and its near threatened status will hopefully stop that trend. The bird flu virus has been found in multiple brands of raw pet food in the United States, according to the Los Angeles Department of Public Health, causing an indoor cat to be tested positive for the bird flu and 4 others to be exposed. The brand, Monarch Raw Pet Food, was sold at farmers markets in California. At the end of 2024, a cat in Oregon died after consuming a raw food product also contaminated by the bird flu, the culprit being a turkey-based food product produced by the brand Northwest Naturals. Certain batches had been recalled following that incident. The most recent finding in California has Los Angeles public health officials warning against the consumption of all raw milk and raw meat products, suggesting pet owners not feed such food to their pets. While felines have been vulnerable to becoming infected with or dying from the bird flu for years, there were no cases reported in the United States until 2022, and by late 2024, over 25 cases were reported. Dr. Jane Sykes, a professor of small animal internal medicine at the University of California, Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, said that most of those cases were cats on dairy farms in states like Texas and Colorado, but also some who were indoor cats with no known exposure to the virus, which leads Dr. Sykes to believe they may have been also fed raw diets or unpasteurized milk. According to a 2024 American Pet Products survey, only about 2% of pet owners feed their dogs or cats a commercial raw food diet. The problem with these diets is that they are more easily contaminated with bacteria and viruses. Traditional commercial pet foods go through processing that makes it almost impossible for salmonella and harmful bacteria to lurk in the food, says Assistant Professor of Microbiology and Director of the Clinical Infectious Disease Laboratory at the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Stephen Cole. That's because cooking and pasteurization kills viruses and bacteria. I've heard for a long time that feeding pets a raw diet is more natural, that it mimics their natural environment because in general you won't see cats and dogs out in the wild roasting their chickens over a bonfire or anything. But this is a big wake-up call to those pet owners who go through the extra trouble of providing raw diets to their beloved pets, often at a much higher cost than if they were to feed them a traditional commercial diet of kibble and canned food. What makes this scarier for me is that in the article written by NBC News on the topic by Linda Carroll, they also bring up freeze-dried foods. I've seen freeze-dried products in everything lately. I just bought 6 bags of freeze-dried cat treats from a recent pet exhibition in Taipei, and I've seen freeze-dried meats in almost half of the dry food I see sold on the shelves in pet stores in Taipei. No kidding, I went to a pet store just yesterday to look for some diet kibble for my cats because they're a little overweight, and I think it's almost about half or almost over half of the products on the shelves for cats, the kibble, included some form of freeze-dried meat. But Dr. J. Scott Weiss, a professor at the Ontario Veterinary College, says that freezing is just a good way to preserve viruses, and that researchers will in fact freeze dry viruses they want to preserve for later study. The freeze-dry process includes freezing it and vacuuming out water crystals, which means cooking and pasteurization may not be a part of the process. Now that I think of that, indeed, when I see freeze-dried products on the packaging, they don't really specify whether it was freeze-dried raw or after it had been cooked. I don't know. A sanctuary in Washington state reported losing 20 large cats like tigers and cougars at the end of 2024 as well, meaning that both the small domesticated cats and larger felines are at risk of contracting the bird flu. Sykes says cats appear to be especially susceptible to certain respiratory viruses, and in the case of the bird flu, cats can become fatally ill very quickly, even just 24 hours after the first symptoms are observed. Current estimates say around 67% of cats infected with the bird flu die. At first, symptoms you might want to look out for include mild respiratory symptoms, loss of appetite, lethargy, fever, severe depression, runny nose, coughing or sneezing, or gunk in the eyes. If your cat starts presenting neurologic symptoms such as stumbling, ataxia, seizures, or blindness, it could very well be fatal. It's also rather hard to catch the illness early on, as Sykes says. Cats will often try hiding their symptoms. Experts suggest getting cats into the vet as soon as possible if they were exposed to the virus. Janelle Goodwin spoke on behalf of the United States FDA to say that the FDA is tracking cases of highly pathogenic avian influenza in domestic and wild cats in California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington state that appear to be linked to eating contaminated food products. Goodwin reassured that no human illness has been reported from handling these foods or through contact between people and the animals. The FDA is working with state and federal counterparts to gather more specific information about what the animals ate, which foods and when, and to coordinate test results of the animals and the suspected foods. In the meantime, the FDA is warning against feeding raw foods that may have come from farms with infected animals, and said that if you're not sure of the origin of your products, it's safest to thoroughly cook or pasteurize that food first to inactivate the the virus. Since wild birds can also carry the virus, Weiss suggests keeping cats from hunting them. And as long as they are fed cooked or pasteurized food and kept indoors, Weiss says you can drop that risk that your cat will contract the virus down to virtually zero. Let's learn about a scientist today. Edward O. Wilson. Edward O. Wilson was born in Alabama in 1929 and was left blind in one eye after a fishing incident at age 7. His interests migrated from bird watching to insect watching, and he later discovered the first colony of fire ants in the U.S. at just 13 years old. What are the rest of us doing with our lives? He attended the University of Alabama, then Harvard, and focused his work primarily on ants. He also studied island biogeography, or the study of isolated ecosystems. He spearheaded efforts to preserve biodiversity and educate people about it, winning 2 Pulitzer Prizes and being named one of the century's leading environmentalists by Time before his passing in 2021. I believe we brought him up in a previous episode. And now the next time you hear somebody ask you, oh, do you know who Edward O. Wilson is? Because they're trying to show you up, you can say, yeah, actually, I do know. In this segment of the last couple episodes, we talked about how to get your dog to stop eating feces and why your dog might be eating feces. It was actually pretty interesting. For this part, I'm referring to Zach George's Guide to a Well-Behaved Dog because he's a real dog trainer. He's a professional, so let's learn from him. Leash pulling is a widely encountered issue when it comes to dog ownership. Considering many folks should walk their dogs outside on a leash, preferably multiple times a day, if your dog pulls while on the leash, it can make that a lot harder and sometimes embarrassing if you're outside in public around other people. The reason why dogs pull on leashes varies. Put yourself in their shoes, first of all, and imagine. To them, the walk isn't just about getting their business done or going to the bathroom. It's also about finding where certain cool smells are coming from and finding out what that interesting thing in the grass is. Maybe also to chase the squirrel that they saw just pass by. As Zach George says, dogs naturally walk significantly faster than people do, and it's not as easy as one might think for dogs to slow down that natural pace. Zach George even says this is actually an advanced skill. So if this is happening to you and you have dogs that are struggling to walk at a normal pace and are pulling on your leash, you shouldn't be too embarrassed by it because it is actually an advanced skill for them to learn, and it is a very common issue that dog owners encounter. Don't let all those people outside walking at normal paces fool you. It takes work. Resolving leash pulling can be done in 2 main steps. Here's the first one. Make sure your dog has gotten enough exercise during the day before the walk so your walk is more manageable, as the dog won't be bursting with energy. Fetch is a good example of something you can do to get some of that energy out. The pros say that one of the best times to do leash training is instantly after a workout that tires your dog out. If your dog is too tired to walk too quickly anyway, they get to experience what you would like the walk to be like, walking at a normal, slower pace. Then your dog can still take in the environment around them without being overwhelmed by excitement. If you don't live somewhere where you can easily exercise your dog first, you could also go on a brisk, faster paced 20-minute walk before slowing down. It's not ideal and it seems a bit counterintuitive, but again, you're aiming to let your dog experience what you'd like the walk to be like, to get used to walking at a slower pace sometimes, even if it's not the whole time. The second step you need to take is actually normalizing the exciting environment that your dog encounters on walks through frequent exposure and desensitization drills. Your objective is for those extra special smells, sights, and sounds to just become normal place. You can do this by starting off on a leash inside your home, then gradually make that environment more challenging. Use commands like sit, or look at me to gauge and determine that the environment is the right amount of challenging. If your dog is responding to those commands, then you're doing well, and it's the right amount of challenging. Take a few steps on a leash inside, ask your dog to sit, and reward them with a treat. This is so much more manageable for the dog. Repeat that, and then after a period of rest or on another day, suddenly surprise your dog with a leash training session inside to teach them that even when they are caught off guard, they need to comply. To make the environment increasingly challenging, you can throw a treat or toy in front of them. If your dog won't comply and won't listen to your commands and behave inside of your home, there's no reason to believe that they are going to behave outside. Once the inside is easy enough, you can move on to doing the same lessons directly outside of your home, like in a driveway or apartment lobby when possible. If at any point you lose control or your dog isn't responding to those commands, you can take it a step back and make it easier and repeat exercises from before continuing on. Eventually, you'll be able to graduate to walks down the street, in the neighborhood, or to the park and beyond. Remember that you should keep up with the reward system, bringing treats along with you, and think of those first dozen or so walks as still training, or you could risk regression. In Zach George's guide, he said it might take several dozen of these training sessions for it to be fully effective, so be patient with yourself. And remember, it shouldn't be too overwhelming for your dog or yourself, and if it is, it might be a little bit too challenging, so take it back a few steps. This segment of the show will teach listeners just like you how to train dogs. Starting with the basics, tune in each episode and you'll eventually be able to do just about anything as far as training goes. I don't currently live with any dogs, but find the knowledge widely applicable as I grew up with dogs, hear of people in my circle who are struggling to train their dogs, and run into stray dogs on my way home every day in Taiwan. So if you're like me and don't currently have a way to apply these methods, well, there's no telling when exactly they might come in handy. In international animal news, a man in Georgia, USA, has been sentenced to nearly 500 years in prison for facilitating dog fights and abusing animals. His sentence is for 475 years in prison, and prosecutors say it is the longest known sentence involving dog fighting anywhere. 107 dogs were seized at this man's property towards the end of 2022, with signs of abuse, some underweight, and many restrained with logging chains in close proximity, a tactic that the Paulding County District Attorney's Office says serves to build dog aggression. Another group of dogs on the property was found living in a basement among their own excrement. Veterinarians examined the dogs and found some with removed teeth and scars from fighting. The dogs were ultimately taken in by a non-profit organization, Friends of the Forlorn Animal Rescue. Supreme Court Judge Dean C. Bucci sentenced the man to 475 years based on his conviction by a jury on 93 counts of dogfighting and 10 counts of cruelty to animals. Prosecutor Jessica K. Rock says the judge sentenced him to the maximum amount allowed by law. I think this is a story, obviously we would rather not have to hear, but we're happy to hear the outcome. I don't think I could count on two hands the amount of times that I've wanted to report some sort of animal cruelty, but I was shut down by people who said, well, you could, but nothing's gonna happen, right? Unfortunately, that is the case in many of these cases where they do have solid evidence and solid proof, but the law just really doesn't allow them to be sentenced to serving time at all in many cases. Some places, pets are just property, so a lot of people get away with the abuse. But there you have it, 475 years. If you have a story you'd like to share, whether that's your own experience, something from where you're from, because we have a lot of international listeners, or something that you saw in the news, why don't you send it my way? If you're a fan of snail mail, you can look for Radio Taiwan International's Taipei address, which is at number 55 Bayon Road. It's you could probably just find it online. That'd be easier. Or you can send me an email at tristan@rti.org.tw. That's tristan@rti.org.tw. Making it to the end of an episode makes you a Formosa Fauna friend. It's not gross, it's cute. Thank you for tuning in, friend. All animals require enrichment, and Formosa Fauna is just that. After all, we're all just a bunch of wild animals. See you next time for Formosa Fauna Fridays here on Radio Taiwan International.